Hello, everybody. This is Andrea. I'm live from the Red Bed in Budapest. This is my bed, and this is where I do my interviews and have all my best conversations with my most interesting friends. So today I have my buddy Tyson, who I've known for 10 years, maybe.
Maybe more.
Yeah, Tyson has had several lifetimes in the time that I have known him. And so I just wanted to talk to you about what you're doing now and how you got there. I know we don't have a lot of time. And so what are you doing now? What is this with the recovery dog project you're working on? Uh-oh. You frozen? Oh. There you are.
Yes, dear. So I got a little bit of a hiccup there, huh?
Yeah. Okay. So
we'll do our best. We'll work through it. It'll be fine.
So tell me about the recovery dog project that you're working on. How did that start? I know that you love dogs. You've been working with rescuing dogs for a while, but
well, it's interesting. Like as you said, the many lifetimes. I actually, when you and I met, I had nothing to do with helping anyone but myself to your money. So I was, I had a call center and we sold investment instruments, and had the BMW. Okay, so it's just reconnecting us here.
Okay.
I can still hear you. So, anyway, I didn't like who I was. I felt like, I was very much a part of everything I felt like I saw was wrong with the world, materialism, greed. I basically sold greed for a living. And, I just, it was not in line with my values. I see that, we're headed for self-destruction if we don't make some changes. And, I wasn't a bad guy and I wasn't a perpetrator, and I could match me up against other people and I could feel very good about myself for the most part. But there was a knowing inside of me that we're in need of some superheroes, people to come out and step out and just take on real gnarly stuff. And so right around that time, after you and I spent some time together, I hit a bottom in my alcoholism and in my drug addiction. And the only way I could see to get out of it was to let go of everything. And our mutual friend who introduced us, Alexis Neely, shout out to Allie, she introduced us. I ended up moving out to Colorado and helping her start a little farm. And you can see some footage of that process at Allie's Farm Evolution.shutterfly.com. It's really cool. It's got pictures of the beginning of a intentional community and a healing center, which was my first attempt. And so I got out there at the Front Range and had a garden and got 21 chickens, and I didn't know anything about gardening. I was raised in DC, and I grew some weed, and I wasn't very good at it. But I went out there and I kind of, started focusing on my relationship with Gaia. I got introduced to ayahuasca, which was a game changer for me. So plant medicines were introduced, and I went to Peru and, spent some time learning from, some people down there that were, pouring ayahuasca and living differently. And when I was out on that farm, I decided, I was like, I need a dog or two. I ended up going to one of the local rescues, and one wasn't enough, so I got two, and which turned into 3 and 4 within like less than a 6-month period. I caught the bug, and I started, getting connected with these animals and really feeling a lot of love, and just, you know, it was amazingly rewarding. And I didn't see it as part of my recovery at the time. It wasn't until years later that I started working with plant medicines in and around recovery that I was like, you know, we need to get a dog here. And I had been doing rescue in my own recovery every chance I got. I would go volunteer at a local rescue if I was traveling. I would foster care dogs, which is a great way for people, you know, if you don't want to take on a dog, and, you know, it's a big commitment, you know. I only had one, well, you know, the main dog I had, her name was Honey Bear. I had her from 21 to 39, like 18 years I had this dog. She was my primary relationship. Yeah. And I really, I don't take getting another dog lightly, because it's it's a big commitment. So, but doing the foster care was like sort of a nice match. And so, yeah, so that's how I kind of sort of evolved into, someone who's always looking, and I got just always look for what's going on in the community when it comes to dogs. So if there's a local rescue, I'll go introduce myself. Sometimes just spend an hour walking the dogs. Sometimes I foster. Now I'm doing my own.
I don't know if you want to talk about university at all, but it seems
about what?
About the Ibogaine University, the healing center for.
Mm-hmm.
I'll call it an alternative healing center for addiction, recovery. And it seems like the dogs and recovery, they keep the two of those things kind of keep coming together. Like they weave the story together. So I'm interested in, as I see your posts, why you're calling it the Recovery Dog Project, or recovery dogs, or
Sure. Well, and I saw the way you called it was addiction and recovery, and it's interesting because we have been conditioned to think that drugs are the problem, and so we've been distracted. Oh, drugs are the problem. No, it's not. I mean, we've created this external thing that has been a way for us as individuals, that we haven't honored the idea that we're connected, that we're all one human experience in individual forms. And so it's been a very convenient distraction, criminalizing and making drugs illegal. It's fueled a legal system. It's kept us separate. It's done a lot to fuel the agenda of a small few. And without getting into the conspiracy theories, pharmaceutical companies don't want you to have natural remedies for your ailments. They want you to go to them and pay for their, patented drugs that they create. So they make it hard to get natural plant medicines. You can't make any claims, and psychedelics specifically are such an effective treatment for depression, trauma, all the reasons why we use these other drugs that they're trying to sell us. So, it being criminalized and illegal has really, again, served the agenda of big pharma, of, the established government institutions that thrive on keeping us, separate and fearful and consuming at an alarming rate, even though we see it's destroying the planet. And so I got involved with the plant medicine because of my own addiction. But what it really is for recovery on all levels, recovering from many generations of trauma that gets passed down. So we as individuals carry with us, when we're born, multi-generational trauma. And it, through epigenetics, gets released by experience. And, we start to be this person with or without an understanding of why we do what we do. And we create a lot of issues and problems that later on in life we need to recover from. So the recovery process, the waking up process, happens whenever it happens, and it doesn't happen for everybody. And you don't finish it. It's not something that, got that done. I woke up during this lifetime.
You mean now that I'm 40, like I'm not just done with all that?
Well, you can be. You can stop whenever you want. You can start back up again. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about, the inquiry process, about like really wanting to understand yourself and realizing that like you just literally infinitely complexed. And you know, and every day and every new experience is an opportunity to better know yourself, if that's what you're into. You know, many of us get caught up in external, you know, our business, our lovers, our all these other things, and you know, it's fun, it's enjoyable to succeed and fail at these endeavors. But if you watch yourself, it's really interesting, and you just watch yourself and be like, oh my gosh, I'm still doing that, or why did I do that? And you start to realize that, like, you know, we're the only thing that needs our attention. It doesn't need to be fixed, because you know that can be a malady too, where we get sort of narcissistic, and it's all about, you know, self-help and fix myself. I'm just more interested in how I'm either bringing love to the scene, or I'm bringing my woundedness and perpetuating suffering. And when I'm working with animals, I find myself in being of service in that way. The man, am I passing on serious love? Because if I can get an animal that was going to be euthanized, get them healthy, socialize them, and get them with somebody who's been isolating and alone and depressed, and just watch it just like tenfold. And you know, how many hundreds of dogs in the few years have I been able to, you know, save from, you know, from being euthanized and getting in, and they're out there. You know, I walk down the Strand in Hermosa Beach, and dogs will come up to me, and the owner will be like, oh my gosh, she doesn't do that. I'm like, well, where'd you get your dog? And they'll say the Lovejoy Foundation. And I'm like, from Mexico, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'll be like, I brought that dog up, you know, and they remember me, you know, but you know, I never met the owners, you know, I can't meet all the owners for all the dogs I bring up from Mexico. So
okay, so you're bringing dogs up from Mexico. How did you connect with dogs in Mexico? Because I'm sure there are a lot of unwanted dogs also in Los Angeles County. So why Mexico?
Yeah, that's a really good question. People are like, you know, like, why are you importing somebody else's problem? It's not really, well, first of all, the culture down there is, you know, getting a dog off the streets and then putting them in the hands isn't necessarily a better quality of life, because, you know, unfortunately in Mexico, you know, they don't really, it's interesting, you know, they don't have the same sort of appreciation and respect. Most of them don't, as a general rule. And anytime, you know, I want to be careful. I'll make statements that may sound like absolute or that I really know. They're just based on some experiences and being in and around it. They often don't get the care that I would say is worthy of such a, you know, amazing animal. So what I was doing is I was working for a clinic, ibogaine, which is a psychedelic plant root that comes from Africa that helps people detox from opiates. It's a powerful teacher, and it's used for addiction. And I was working for a clinic, and I, you know, wanted to bring, you know, a dog into the scene because I was working with the patients one-on-one, and I did. And I was thinking to myself, man, I really want to start an aftercare program and, you know, start getting some of these dogs off the street, get them socialized. And I was working for the Lovejoy, well, volunteering for the Lovejoy Foundation. So I'd get just one or two dogs, work up with them myself, and bring them up, because I didn't feel good placing them down there. I mean, I do occasionally find a nice home. There's plenty of good quality people in homes in Mexico. But for the most part, what I do is I vet them, I quarantine them, I get them their appropriate shots, I care for them, I socialize them, and then bring them up. And I actually now have, what I did for a while, and I'm restarting again, is using them in therapy for people that have struggled not with addiction so much as the core traumas that are the cause of the addictions, right? So if you have vets that have, you know, been asked to pull the trigger and take a life, or, you know, witnessed lives taken around them, you know, all the different horrors that come with war, you know, that's not our nature. Not a one. There's not one person that is cut out for war. You know, some say they are, you know, but it's just not true.
Dogs have an amazing ability to, I always think about it, they are like these magical sponges. And if we are anxious or nervous or scared, we can snuggle with them, and they just take all of that stuff away, and they just evaporate it up into the ethers, and they just pull it away and they send it off. And
yeah, they are. Yeah, that's healing right there. It's, you know, it's emoting.
And there are a lot of people that don't have love or intimate relationships, and they don't have snuggles. And you know, every human being needs snuggles and affection and love. And you know, I had a family member who was mentally ill, and that was one of the things that we did for him is we got him a dog. And I remember just him talking about how much love he felt for this dog, and because of his mental illness, it made it difficult for him to have romantic relationships in the way that the think about it. So I think it was an amazing experience for him.
They help, you know, and you know, people with, like you said, with mental illness, they can't relate to people, and their communication is nonverbal. So, you know, and the love's unconditional, you know, like truly love unconditional that you hear about, like in God's love, like in the Bible or something, not like our parents, because our parents, you know, they, you know, we have this sort of, we domesticate. Here's the funny thing about it. There's a book, Don Miguel Ruiz wrote The Four Agreements and Toltec Book of Knowledge, two great books. And I can't remember which one of them, but in the beginning of them, one of them, he talks about how we domesticate our children like we train our dogs with punishment and reward. And then I think to myself, well, you know, your parents then at that point say, I love you if you do this, this, and this, but when you don't, I'm upset with you. So, you know, at a very young age, we stop trying to do what is happy for us, and we figure out what makes my parents happy. Now I got to do that, and that's the beginning of the loss of our authentic self. And it happens at a young age. And you know, I mean, our parents don't know any better. Of course, they love us, but it's definitely conditional. And to receive the love from them, to get the loving kindness, to get the acts of love and the words of love require certain behavior. When with animals, it's just not the case. With dogs specifically, they sit around just thinking of ways to make you happy. And it's part of that.
And I'll tell you what, I can't do that for a partner.
Nor should you. Nor should you.
Like, and I would never partner to be able to do that for me. Like, I just.
I feel like, you know, that sort of Christ consciousness, that really sort of utopian love, no matter what, is coming, and it's gonna come in, like, you know, in little pieces and forms, and, you know, learning how to accept people right where they're at. Addiction is a good indicator of it, because people that find themselves trapped getting self-soothing through drugs or dealing with their trauma by medicating, however the relationship happens, they develop this relationship with the drug that keeps them separate from their family. So it's the separation that allows the addiction to take root. And what we do is we call these beings, these beautiful spiritual beings, addicts, and we put them in a box, literally in a cage, or we, you know, tell them, go do this, this, and this before you're welcome back in the home. And these are our parents doing tough love, or you know, the prison system, or a job, you know. And so, you know, what if you know, you were able to love that person right where they're at, and keep them, you know, in the family, and reflect to them how they're using showed up, and love them no matter what. And, you know, there was a study done about, you guys heard about the rats, where, you know, they put the water and then they put cocaine in the water, and then the rats would take the cocaine water until they died. You know, they would just keep hitting it, and they would just, you ever heard that study about addiction, and about how, you know, the cocaine is so addictive that if you put it in a bottle with a rat, they'll do it until they die, right? And that was, they used to show how dangerous and addictive cocaine was. And then somebody did the same study, except for they put the bottle of cocaine and water next to regular water in a cage full of other rats, like a rat, like playground, with everybody's running around with wheels and happy. And most rats only did it once or twice. None of them ever did it to dying. So the environment was really the greatest indicator whether or not somebody was going to, like, use addictively. And then once the physical addiction has taken root and you have what's called, have withdrawal symptoms, if you stop, then it really is hard. And that's what I work with these plant medicines are to help not only, on a psychological level, but on a very real physical level, interrupting the addiction and returning neuroplasticity to the receptor sites associated with opiate addiction, alcoholism. It works for and methamphetamine, just about everything can be greatly affected by ibogaine if you take it for the purpose of interrupting your addiction. It's not a cure. I mean, that's where the being part of your community, doing the dog rescue, being of service, the dogs help open up the heart space. When you've been judged and ostracized and thrown out of your family, nobody loves you. You haven't felt love in a long time and you feel guilty and shameful, but you put a puppy dog in your hands and immediately the oxytocin's released. You feel love, you feel good. It's the same thing as a benzo. So instead of benzos, you give them a puppy, and now that their heart's opened up and the person that gave it to them, well, of course I'm going to trust that person because they just made me feel really good. And so now I'm in a space where I can actually talk about some of my problems and let go. And that's where the cognitive behavioral therapy, when I'm not trying to say traditional rehabs and therapies can't be effective, but why are we only getting 10%? Why are 90% not able to stay sober? Is because there are many things that aren't being addressed. The physiology, the damage done by the abuse of the drug, the lack of a real caring, nurturing environment to go home to. And if you've never built trust and opened the heart, you're not doing anything. It's like you're talking about it and you're working things, but you're not getting down to the core of it. You're not replacing where it is rooted in your being. So it does require you be able to open up and to have some trust and really look at what beliefs are these traumas feeding, right? And so, like, again, the dogs are like the ibogaine or ayahuasca are just a vehicle to address one aspect of addiction or one part of the recovery process for whatever it is that you're dealing with, whether it be addiction or depression or an eating disorder, whatever.
What if you're just an asshole and you need to recalibrate? Can it help you, just get out of like
that's most people.
cycles?
That's most people. I find that most people are, wounded and they hurt and they're judgmental and they're critical of others and they point the finger as opposed to looking at themselves. So to me, that's kind of the definition of an asshole. Somebody is more concerned with, your part, not their part. Right. And so that's most people, right? And so, so I think that I believe that everybody could benefit from experiencing and investigating plant medicines. There are some people, because of their mental issues, that it may not be appropriate for. I
watch your Global Recovery Today podcasts that are also on YouTube, and I'm linking to those in this video. There's a link at I think it's the top right. So it'll be in.
Beautiful. Also. And now it's iHeartRadio picked us up last week, so now we'll be on iHeartRadio every week or every other week.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so what do you need right now in terms of, I know we talked earlier today, you have lots of support coming in and people really excited about what you're doing with the dogs, bringing the dogs from Mexico, but what is it that you need?
Okay, so let's talk about what the issue is. So in Rosarita, Tijuana area, there's a population of dogs that are basically running the streets, and they have dog catchers that will go and pick them up in onesies, twosies, and then take them out to a shelter kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And they've got almost no money, barely enough for food. They've got one employee. He's out there from like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and he has the weekends off. So whatever dogs are there are alone. Go to my my either Facebook or YouTube. I'll give you my contact information. But just look up Tyson Elliott and Recovery Dogs. You'll see videos of me like going there this past weekend, and the dogs were alone, and I like jumped the fence. They got a pit bull in there, and I had to do my dog whisperer sort of, to get the dog to let me in the first time. And then after going back, it got to know me and it knew that I was going to bring food and water. And that's where the puppies that I've been bringing up, I just go down there. Now, the people there really want to help. I mean, the person that's in charge of that is doing the best they can with the resources. So I ended up going and meeting with them and saying, hey, look, they've got this property. They don't have power. They don't have water. They don't have adequate medication for the dogs. Because the dogs aren't going to live long, their youth get euthanized usually within a few days of the times that they're picked up. They don't spend any money on vaccinating, because why vaccinate it and then kill it, right? So what I'm going to do is I've already started a crowdfunding, which I don't think it's been approved yet, but I've got crowdfunding. I filed for 501c3, the recovery dogs. So I'll have a nonprofit established to be able to, for people that want to make donations, to be able to write them off. I want to get power and water to the dogs, and I want to get a system of taking people that are coming down, vets specifically, because there's so many vets that are isolated, they're in wheelchairs, they're on permanent disability, and I can get them down there for a week or a month at a time, and they can help us fix the place up, and they can work with the animals, and then we'll post the animals online, and people from all over the country, you're watching the story and you get moved and inspired, and you're like, oh my God, that dog's perfect for me. We'll send them out to you. This is the day of, Amazon, where, anything and everything you want can be delivered. I've got my judge, huh?
You can deliver a dog from Mexico anywhere in the US, anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. Well, I haven't tried outside of the U.S., but, I just bring them into the U.S. and then I can send them anywhere in the U.S. Going to different countries, quarantines and stuff like that, I don't think that's viable. But if you are in the States or in Mexico, then we can. And, we have a saturated market, meaning like there's a lot of rescues with dogs that need to be placed. There are dogs in shelters. And until we're, no more killing, which is the goal in the States, then I'm not like really trying to tax, there are a lot of people in the rescue community that don't like what I'm doing, keep it in Mexico. And I may choose to do that at some point, work really, really hard on educating the population down there and try to find them homes. That may be the way I go. Right now I'm doing the best I can with, trying to check in with my heart and my stomach, and the laws and the community, so that I'm not just, making decisions, on a whim, and what's right for me now might not be right for me tomorrow. And, I believe that process of always questioning, where am I coming from and how does it serve the greater good? It's not a small thing. That right there that I do is the most important thing. It's not the dog rescue. It's not any of the other things that I point that process at. But if we all collectively took each day as an opportunity to see how we were doing something that was perpetuating suffering or creating more negative energy than positive energy, and we focused at that as our primary purpose, is to be more part of a solution and see how we can help things and bring this world around to a better way of being. If we all did that, what if that happened? What if everybody took one day just to worry about themselves and not everybody else? Imagine the change that we'd see in the world.
That's some good stuff right there.
Yeah. So, but, I choose the dogs because it's pretty clear that there's a need there, and I get a lot of joy out of it. And, I get to be the superhero, and it's fun, you get to choose, yeah, there was a period of time when I was the villain and I didn't even know it. I thought I was I guess I didn't know I didn't think I was a hero. I wasn't lying to myself, but, I thought I was, hot shit. And, the main, I look back on it and I kind of like laugh, and it gives me compassion for other people. Like I understand when you're ready, you're ready.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And it wasn't any one thing, but, I had a number of near-death experiences being an alcoholic, flipping my X5. I mean, I got a scar going across. You can see it right here where my face was hanging off me. And, I was drinking 2-buck Chuck and dust and snuffing and huffing dust off. I was a precious metals broker, commodities, had all these like this big shot, and I'm drinking cheap wine and huffing, keyboard cleaner for the nitrous, because I just needed to check out. My addictive mindset was running the show, and I wasn't happy with who I was. And so I was self-medicating, and it nearly killed me.
I listened to the podcast where you spoke with your mother about what that experience was like, growing up, dealing with, drugs and family dynamics. And it was really interesting. And I actually didn't know this about you, because we were working together, 10 years ago, and then, just kind of had mutual friends. And so I had no idea actually that this was in your background. And what it reminds me of is that you just don't know how people are walking around suffering silently. And
we're not, we don't have time. I don't have time. That's your problem. That's the thing, people, when you get into a therapy, like an intentional community, where people will lovingly share the truth with you, if you can, trust people to be able to reflect, hey, this is how you're showing up. So then you can change your behavior, because so many of us don't even realize that we're doing it. But in today's society, I don't have time to help you be a better person. I just stop hanging out with you when you wonder why you don't have any friends. And, people don't, is because you got some pretty weird little personality things that turn people off and you don't know it, right? So like if you can get into an environment where people will share it with you and you can take it and you can evolve, and then you start realizing, oh man, I got some bad habits, like I interrupt people, I talk too fast. I mean, like I'm talking about a few of my own things that I've, since I was a kid, kind of realized, but not been able to fix, or only to a degree, because people don't shut me down. They're like, oh, there's that blowhard. And now the good news is that I've actually taken that truth, those little character defects, if you would. And, I used to be, I thought I was a master manipulator, and I could sell anything to you. And then I judged myself for it, and I felt shameful because of how I used that skill set. But now I get to use that same skill set to help people overcome the fear they need to do like a really radical, what's considered radical because of the criminalizations. Ayahuasca, ibogaine, these are illegal in the States and they work. So, when I'm talking to a mother or, a young woman that, come on down to Mexico and, take a powerful psychedelic. Oh, by the way, yeah, some people have died, I mean, like this got everything going against it, except for is extremely effective. As far as detoxing from opiates, it works every time pretty much. I mean, there are some withdrawals, but for the most part, you take care of all the opiate withdrawals with ibogaine. The traumas released by psychedelics are amazing, and all the evidence is there, but unfortunately we've stigmatized it and a lot of misinformation and outright, lies about it.
Well, you've got a lot of, you share a lot of great information on your podcast about this. So anybody that finds this video should go check out your podcast. And I think one of the things that you said, I'd like to continue in a separate conversation just about our ego. And these are some conversations and thinkings that I've been having lately with myself and others about how our ego is a fantastic way to build skills. Sometimes it pushes us, like you were saying, you learn how to become a master manipulator. It pushes us to, compete against everyone else and to conquer, and then, but it's usually the thing that allows us to acquire the skills, and then we have time to recalibrate, course correct, and decide how we're going to use them. So I'd like to talk about, in maybe a following conversation, about honoring the ego, because in the spiritual, conscious community, I hear a lot of talk about how the human ego is so bad.
Yeah. Well, I think we are moving from a very masculine, male, sort of masculine dominated to the more feminine, right? And so like, the masculine wants to kill the ego, and then, but really it's more about honoring it for, oh, I see where that comes from, but it's got its time and place. And so we just don't let it make all the decisions for us, and we get much more into a collective collective decision-making process, not the individual. but the ego has something to bring to the table. It's got experience. It's a critical part of who we are. We just can't let it run the show. And so once you're aware of it, you can simply sort of nod your head and choose to, you know, choose its latitudes. Don't let it decide, you know. So that's I feel the same way. You know, we give ego a bad rap. I mean, you know, it can come up with some great ideas and inspire us to do great things. You know, I mean, without egos, some of the greatest things that we see on there today never would have happened. You know, like it takes a pretty big ego to go climb Mount Everest. You know.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Climbing Mount Everest in itself, if you just think about, you know, it's hard. It's hard on your body. There's a lot of proper preparation. There's a lot of expense. You might die. The only reason you want to do it is for the glory, for the celebration of your human ego. Like, I mean, it's not like that's part of the adventure. That's part of the adventure of life. So I think it can level us up in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, it makes you grateful for it, and you know, it takes away some of that pressure. You know, you ask what you know, what do I need? What's going? You know, so you know, the money's good, but you know, also people that just basically reach out and say, hey, look, I want to help spread the word because I'm not very good at like social media, and like I got all these web pages. I don't know how to make them work together, and so like there's plenty of areas where somebody you know probably in an hour or two a week could do what I just can't do myself. So I'm looking for people that can help out on that level, and then you know sharing, you know, like linking and friending and you know subscribing to the pages, you know, can be you know as valuable as you know $100 donation, but you know $100 donation is nice too. And you know, if people want to come down and visit, and you know, like say you live in you know the Midwest and you'd like to go, you know, get on the beach, you know, and you call me up, and you know, I'd love to show you Baja and you know, take you on a little tour of Mexico. So you know, I'm a pretty personable guy. I like to meet people, and so.
Sounds like a fun opportunity. Sounds like a good family trip, really.
And then if you're struggling with addiction and you need treatment, you know, I mean, we are open. I'm like going down this weekend and looking at, I have 2 houses now that are a clinic specifically for detoxes. That's a 30-day program. But problem is that we're then sending them back to the culture to which their addiction is a function. So we're not, you know, like we got to kind of almost create a whole another community, but steps into until people have grown to a certain level of personal integrity and maturity. Because when you start using substances to cope with life, you stop maturing. So then you take away the substance, and your you know life experiences come at you, and you're expected to deal with them as an adult. Well, you haven't ever done it as an adult. Why would you be able to do it now? So you know, them staying, you know, in a community where we do dog rescue, gardening, yoga, you know, music, arts and crafts. I mean, we try to live like more authentically. It's not about going to work, coming home, you know, being productive. You know, it's a different way of life. We slow it down a couple notches and we focus on service and the inquiry process. And it can be helpful whether you struggle with addiction or eating disorders, or just the same thing we kind of all have is this feeling of separation, you know, like I just feel detached and alone sometimes, you know. So you get into a community of people that are working on themselves, and it's an amazing experience.
And do the people that are at your center at the same time, do they often develop close bonds? Do they stay in touch with each other? And do they create a support system for each other?
So we are now, I'm in the process. And again, the problem is like, I, you know, got all these great ideas because of my experience, but not a lot of money, and I can't do it. But Aftergain is a website that's going to be hosted. And what that is when people come out, they'll actually be able to put their profile up so they can share their experience with people that are interested in, you know, what an Ibogaine or an ayahuasca experience is like. But they can also sign up for groups that are happening already, or they can create their own group. Like say, like I'd like to have a group that talks about like your red bed thing. You start your own, your own group, and you talk about whatever you want, and you invite people, and however you do it. But anyway, so you can create your own support group through Aftergain, and then I'm also inviting clinicians and different therapists from all, because I work with and go to a lot of conferences where people are like, oh my God, you get to work with people that are doing medicine. What's that like? Because they really crave the ability to work with people that have gone through, sexual abuse, trauma, loss of loved ones, and, transcended addiction through the use of psychedelic medicines. And, what's that like? Well, they don't have anybody to work with because it's not legal in the States. So the Aftergain model, once it's launched, is going to be a hub where students, teachers, professionals can actually link up with patients, clients, community members to talk about their experience, and so that they can sort of, one, provide maybe some therapeutic services at a lower cost to people that do this, while gaining really important experience on what's going to be the future. Psychedelic medicines are where it's at. They work. What they have in common is that a psychedelic permeates the blood-brain barrier. What that means is it's actually creating new neurological pathways. So what do we do when we break an old habit? Is we're disrupting a flow state or a neurological pathway, creating a new one. And it's hard because most of what we do happens on a subconscious level. So it's just happening naturally. We built a habit. So to break those habits requires work and habit and stuff. But you take psychedelics, it can happen like literally overnight. You create all this new potential. And in that space, shortly after your experiences, if you practice a few new habits, it's much easier to adopt that new habit post ayahuasca, post 5-MeO-DMT, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, then the Native Americans have been working with peyote, which is mescaline. So it's traditionally in just about every culture there's some form of psychedelic medicine, either naturally or and then in our culture we got LSD. So.
Well, you're pretty brave to be a champion. I know that you split your time, and I know that you're also very careful and you're very clear on what is allowed in the U.S. and what's allowed in Mexico. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't live in fear of, there's that idea that, they're going to arrest me or that I'm doing something illegal. One, I'm not doing anything illegal. There might be an argument that, convincing people to go to Mexico and do it. So there are a lot of people that won't do it because of that fear. But if I didn't do what I'm doing right now, I can't even tell you the hundreds of lives that would be lost. And I'm not kidding. I have people call considering ibogaine, and they say they don't make the decision, and then I find out shortly after they died of overdose. So that's happened. It's happened, more than I can count on both my hands. How many people died of overdoses that were considering treatment that never came. We now have the leading cause of accidental death is overdose. 59,000 last year, and that's primarily pharmaceuticals, not even heroin. This is coming from our doctors.
Yeah, prescription painkillers. That's where it all begins. Mm-hmm. I think that that's really shocking for people who want to judge the drug user. And they see drug abuse as something that happens with criminals on the street and sleazy drug deals in the corner. It's not happening. It's happening after a knee surgery. Your doctor's writing a prescription. It's happening because you slipped a disc in your back, and your doctor writes a prescription. Like, that's how it's happening.
But more importantly, if you look at the whole opiate relationship, starting from heroin coming out of wherever it's coming from, let's say Mexico and the Middle East and Afghanistan, which is controlled by the CIA, but let's just say it's getting here. We know it's here. It's there on the streets. When's the last time you heard about a big heroin bust? Mm-hmm. I haven't ever heard about it. They're not trying to bust it. I don't see them arresting anybody, individual people in the streets, so that they can put them in jail and get all the money that comes from criminalization of it. But you've got kids going in from a busted knee, the doctor gives them a pain pill. They start taking it and they're almost immediately triggered to really enjoy this opiate high, which is available, by the way, in the schools, and the other kids are doing it. They just, for whatever reason, have chose not to succumb to it. But right now it's epidemic. Kids all over are using and dying at, okay, epidemic. I don't know what the number is, but just so what happens is they can't afford the pain pills. They get cut off. So they go to heroin, which is readily. Then now they're hooked on heroin. They're 15 years old. They've been slamming heroin for a year or two and they get busted by their parents. Parents can't even believe that their 15-year-old daughter, who, was a star student just a year ago, is now slamming heroin. And so they take him to the doctor. And you know what the doctor says? You know what the doctor does? Doctor says, well, we've got this great drug called Suboxone or methadone or Subutex. Methadone has been around a long time. You've heard of it. It's a synthetic opiate. It's just as addictive. You're hooked on it the rest of your life. 10% of the people that ever get put on methadone ever get off. They spend the rest of their life on it. Suboxone and Subutex is similar. Well, it's called the harm reduction drug. It is a combination antagonist and protagonist, antagonist, the way the medications work. But you take it once a day. You're physically addicted to it. It's a $1 trillion industry. But when you look at all of them, pain pills, heroin, and the solution to the problem that they created, it's worth more money than oil. And OPEC and oil and that whole conglomerate is not sustainable. It's got a shelf life. That's why we have this war this global warming, is to force the and get every last penny out of the oil before we switch over to solar. But drug pharmacy companies don't have to worry about that because we're always going to need drugs as long as they can keep us sick, and so keep eating the junk food that's so easily and readily available. But, I do believe that we're waking up. The process is happening. You can't stop it. There's going to be a shift, I believe, sooner rather than later, hopefully, in the people that are able. I got to think that there's going to be a shift in the control mechanisms, but it doesn't matter because if we each individually simply let go of blaming everybody else, take responsibility that we're out there causing issues. Where am I the problem? What can I do differently today?
At the end of every day, yeah. For every problem in the world, the best question is, how can I be part of the solution right now? And what in this situation do I see reflected in me? And when I look at politics, when I look at anything, crime statistics, global warming.
Can be overwhelming, but just take one little thing each day. You know what I mean? A little something. Try to look like with the red meat. I know I love red meat, and I've tried the vegetarian thing. And if I go long enough without it, I don't feel good. It's because I don't take the time to change to be responsible for my diet. But instead of completely stopping, I just cut it in half. So I've been able to minimize my red meat intake and say no more often than I used to, so that I'm not part of the problem, because I know that the bovine industry is one of the biggest perpetrators. And in one sentence you hear me say, oh, we've fabricated global warming. No, I'm saying that the agenda to utilize global warming to increase the cost of petrol is real, and most global warming is probably a natural cycle, but absolutely releasing greenhouse gases does create a temperature increase. But more importantly, cows graze on flat land, and so when you tear down trees that clean the air so that you can have grazed land, and I've been in Panama, I've been in third world countries, I see what they're doing, and to tell them that no, they can't do it when that's the primary financial driver, their poverty, they need to do it. So how are you going to go down there and tell them stop producing cattle, stop doing it? As long as there's demand, they're going to do it. So you really got to minimize the demand. You got to take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Yeah, I didn't know if I lost you. It's like I saw your lips move, but then I didn't hear anything.
My battery. I'm trying to move my laptop closer to the charger so I can plug it in. So it's late here. I think I need to sign off.
I gotta get back to work.
Great talking to you. Yeah, I know you had a little more time than I expected. It was great. So look forward to catching up. You know, it'd be great is for both the dog recovery and for Ibogaine University, if you have a list of needs, and I could link people to your list of needs and how, even if it's just a list of your email, then that would be great.
Yeah, I'm likely going to use, like I said, I've got a number of, websites, and I'm trying to figure out, I need some help just organizing it. But the recoverydogs.com, it's cool. It's a Shutterfly website, and it's got like a calendar and a volunteers list. It's got really all the pieces I needed to effectively orchestrate and manage human resources and, financial resources. I need some help. So the first thing would be, if anybody's watching this that, feels like they might be able to help with that, that'd be great. But yes, I'll put together a list of, material things that need to be done. Again, being in Mexico, unless you're sitting on a bunch of dog food that needs to be placed, it's just easier to send money. You know what I mean? Because then I can get everything that we need down there. But if you've got, we need dog collars and leashes and things like that. I want to, minimize people spending a lot of money shipping stuff, in the carbon footprint. Think about things like that, because, maybe those things would better go to a local shelter, and, I appreciate people wanting to help, but again, make smart choices and look at the globe, look at the big picture impact. You know what I mean? Like, you're helping one little thing, but if you're killing 3 people to help one person, you're not really, what's your, you got to look at the big picture. So, so people that, like I said, in their desire to help, make sure that it's not hurting others to get it to me. So.
Good reminder. All right, Tyson. Well,
Yes,
have a wonderful day. Thanks for spending your lunch with me.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. Keep doing what you're doing. I love you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.